Despite trying and reportedly offering significant draft capital to get Chase Claypool, the Green Bay Packers do nothing at the trade deadline. So now what? Plus, our pal Lily Zhao comes in for another Zhao You Doing. That all starts right now.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook, subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts. You'll find Locked On Packers, the number one Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. Use the promo code Locked On to get a $100 deposit bonus, up to $100, depending on what you put in, with the promo code Locked On. All right, our shows have been running a little long lately, so I do not want to waste a bunch of time. I don't know. I feel bad about saying that. I don't want to waste time hearing me talk. But I want to get right into our discussion with Lily Zhao. We talk Packers trade deadline in action. We talk about a lot of different things relating to the Bills game and the offense moving forward and the defense. And so there's a lot to get to. I want to make sure that we're not overloading you this week after what was already a tough game to watch. So let me just start here because we'll get into some of the inaction stuff. And we didn't know, Lily and I, when we recorded this, it was before the reporting came out that the Packers offered a second-round pick for Chase Claypool. This is important information because Tom Silverstein reported it at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, and Andrew Filipponi in Pittsburgh reported it. So now you're having it on both sides. It's not just, okay, who is benefiting from this reporting, which is something you always need to take into account when you hear anonymous reporting. So this is something that we have to take seriously. The Packers made a real, legitimate offer for Chase Claypool, and the understanding is the reason Pittsburgh took the Bears pick is because Justin Fields with Chase Claypool, not as dangerous as Aaron Rodgers with Chase Claypool in terms of the compensation back. That's a big deal, right? So there's the irony of the Bears and the perception of them as a team that still sucks versus Green Bay, and it working to hurt the Packers in this case, trying to get a guy like Chase Claypool, and then he goes to a division rival. You have TJ Hawkinson going from Detroit to Minnesota, the team leading the division, a division rival. So I get why Packers fans, why Packers media, why national media are annoyed at the Packers inaction. Totally and 100% get it. It's also the case you need two teams to make a deal. And the same thing was true with the Khalil Mack deal in a very similar set of circumstances where Green Bay was in aggressively on that trade, but Oakland at the time really only engaged Chicago with that discussion. Similar in the A.J. Brown trade. This has been something that Jason Hirschhorn, America's Guest, and my co-founder at The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to, has been all over that was the trade that the Packers needed to make. And look, of course, that would have been a great trade for Green Bay to make, but that was one of those weird trades that came together sort of at the last minute, according to Diana Rossini. That was a trade that those discussions started about a different player, and they landed on A.J. Brown, and it all sort of came together last minute. There was no bidding war. There was no open market competition. This wasn't 6 teams offered. And so, it's not like they were going to do the deal for A.J. Brown and called Green Bay and said, hey, can you beat a first? No, that's not what happened. It always takes 2 teams to make these deals. So could they have gone and given up literally anything to get Kendrick Bourne? Sure. Could they have called and tried to get Nelson Aguilar? Yeah, sure they could have. Could they have bet the farm and given up 2 first-round picks for DJ Moore? Yeah, they could have. But it always takes the other team not only picking up the phone, but saying, yes, we will do this deal with you. And that's part of this too, is you have to have a front office willing to do a trade with you. That's what makes the TJ Hawkinson deal a little surprising, because those are divisional teams. And if you're the Lions, like, why are yes, you're getting real draft capital for that player, but now you're sending him to a team that you got to play 2 times a year. Like, why are you doing that exactly? I don't think TJ Hawkinson is that great a player, but like, it's weird. It's weird. We don't usually see that happening. So I get both sides of it. And I get this argument of, well, one player doesn't change their fortune. And so don't waste a second or a third round pick to get a player who's not going to help them this year. That's why the rookie contract thing was important, so that you're getting someone who's not just a player this year, but can help you in the years to come and maybe potentially be someone that you sign long term. Albert Breer reported that the Bears were viewing this as their Allen Lazard, someone who could play in the big, play the slot, who'd block, who could get vertical, and who was a big body in the middle of the field. Well, Allen Lazard might not be on this team next year. So that's why you go out and you offer someone like Chase Claypool so you can bring him in this year and then next year. So I get that standpoint. I also think that it would have been smart to, if they could swing a deal, go do it. I would have wanted them to go do it. Brandon Cooks' contracts made that really tough. I don't know why Houston and Brandon Cooks signed a deal that made him really hard to trade, only to turn around and be open to trading him. And it doesn't seem like from his social media, he's super pleased about being shopped. And I think that's also one of the reasons why he did that trade and no trade ended up happening, is because he didn't really want to get moved. So now you're looking at a situation where, all right, the Bears, just by virtue of being the Bears, outbid you. And the Brandon Cooks thing isn't going to happen. How many other moves really move the needle? I don't think TJ Hawkinson moves the needle for this team very much. I don't think the difference, I just like, tight ends don't matter that much generally. So the difference between like the 5th best tight end and the 15th best tight end, it's marginal. It's tiny. Like if it's Travis Kelce, if it's Mark Andrews, if it's George Kittle, those guys matter. Like Darren Waller can't stay on the field. He's been nothing this season. Dallas Goedert's a really, really good player. He probably matters. Kyle Pitts, what is he? Top 5 pick. He looked awesome at times last year. This year has not been a factor at all. Like there are very few tight ends who consistently impact the game. And so, that's a lot of draft. I would not have liked the trade if the Packers had made the TJ Hawkinson move. Big Bob Tonyan was basically the second or third most productive, depending on what kind of metrics you care about, tight end in the league in 2020. This sort of positional volatility happens all the time, where random guys all of a sudden have 8-10 touchdown seasons, or they have 850 yards randomly because their team needs them in a given situation. Like, it's kind of like running back in that unless you have one of the truly elite guys, everyone after a certain point just doesn't really matter. And the really, really good tight ends move the needle, I think, actually more than the top running backs, because they're just more good running backs. But it's just not a move I would have made. So I don't know that there were that many great options for the Packers. This flaw in this team started in the spring when they were not able to swing a trade, and when they were not able to move up in the first round to get the guy that they wanted, or when they, mishandled, in my opinion, and has been my opinion from the start, their first round. They could have walked out of this draft with 3. I mean, maybe they did walk out with 3 really good players. We don't know what Christian Watson is going to be. Romeo Doubs looks like a player, and Samori Toure all of a sudden looks like a player. But can you win with those guys? Doesn't seem like you can this year. All right, we're going to get to Lily in a second. Before we do, let's talk about Simply Safe. If you've thought about securing your home with home security, but have been putting it off, you need to listen up. Right now, Locked On Packers listeners can order the #1 rated Simply Safe home security system for 50% off. This is their biggest offer of the year, and you don't want to miss it. These systems can be expensive if you let them. And because there's so many different options that you can use, cameras and sensors and all kinds of stuff. I've got all kinds of stuff, right? I've got sensors, I've got cameras, I've got everything that I want as part of my system, because security is important to me and my family. So in an emergency with Simply Safe, 24-hour professional monitoring, plus the cameras, the sensors, all that good stuff. Use Fast Protect technology exclusively from Simply Safe to capture critical evidence and verify the threat is real, so you can get a priority police response. Simply Safe is whole home security with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door, HD security cameras inside and out, and even hazard sensors that detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. And this 24/7 professional monitoring service costs less than $1 a day. Less than half the price of ADT's traditional professionally installed system. Don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system that I would recommend. Get 50% off any new Simply Safe system at simplysafe.com/lockedon. That's the biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. simplysafe.com/lockedon NFL. Locked on NFL is the /. There's no safe like Simply Safe. And thanks for making Locked On Sports Today your first listen. For your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today. I think I said that wrong. Thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen. Check out Locked On Sports Today. Doesn't matter. Listen to both shows, please. From the games that matter to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. Joining me now, the Packers just cannot get off the schneid, and that means that another edition of Zhao You Doing has to be about an L. But we are not just going to take L's around here. Lily Zhao from Fox 6 in Milwaukee. We are going to pick ourselves up and keep on going. Zhao You Doing?
Peter, we are winners over here, you and I. So I'm going to take that winning mentality into this week. It's definitely very weird territory to be talking about a loss for the last month. But, I'm doing well. I'm enjoying our nice weather today in Wisconsin before things tank later this week. So I'm good. So how you doing?
The snow is just around the corner. I know you know that. So I am good. I am good. Let's start, as we're recording this, just shortly after the trade deadline. I'm kind of hoping something breaks so we can react to it live, but that seems unlikely at this point. I think I know the answer to this, but how surprised were you that the Packers stood pat at the deadline?
I would say if there was ever a year to make a trade, it would have been this year. But in terms of being surprised, not so much. Again, the Packers have a long history of kind of just staying pat, or if they make a trade, it's not anything worthy of a blockbuster trade per se. But again, I do think, it was surprising because, again, the talk was wide receiver. Who could they potentially get? And the answer is nobody. So they're going to have to make things work with who they have on the roster. But at this point, you have the guys on the team. You're going to have to make it work. But I will say it's discouraging, though, because I think you're looking to see, can they just make this big trade and get this thing going? But alas, they did not.
So it's interesting because as you go into this week, I was hearing from Packer fans who were saying, look, don't use future capital to chase a win now move. And I'll tell you what I think of that in a second. But what do you think of just that idea this season for Green Bay?
I think you have to kind of weigh, is this person or persons going to be what catapults us to a playoff contending team? Or is this person that we're going to acquire just going to be enough to get us to like 8 or 9 wins on the season? Is it going to be a big enough move that this team can, move the meter towards greatness, or hey, just another good player that Aaron Rodgers can throw to? And looking at
not throw to,
but looking at the options, it's Packers were in talks with certain guys, it didn't fall through. In talks with Chase Claypool, goes to the Bears. There were talks with Brandon Cooks, but nothing was done with him, so he's still in Houston. I understand you don't want to give up the future and those future draft picks for a big blockbuster move of any sort. But then at some point you have to kind of weigh, with Aaron Rodgers' window, why not go for it now? But then I understand the argument of, is this player going to be enough to get us to the postseason and have us actually contend, or just be, a 9-win team?
Yeah, there's this idea in economics, the idea of the long run versus short run. And then there's this old quote: in the long run, we're all dead. And so like you can't worry too much about the long run, because in the long run, who knows what's going to happen, right? And I think that's where the Packers find themselves, in a position that they've created for themselves. In the long run, Aaron Rodgers isn't here. And so the cap hole or whatever that they find themselves in is sort of irrelevant, because they're probably not going to compete at a high level, even if we think that Jordan Love can be a solid guy eventually. Probably not going to be in year one. The Packers were 6-10 that first year with Aaron Rodgers, even though Aaron Rodgers played pretty decent football. So I sort of get that part of it. And I also get that this was expensive. Chase Claypool for a second round pick, that's a lot. You looked at the TJ Hawkinson deal. I thought that was way too much for a tight end that I think is just like a good player, but doesn't change your life. So I see both sides of it, but I also see the fan frustration. I go, I get it. I hear you. And if I'm Aaron Rodgers, I mean, you heard him on Pat McAfee go, I was kind of hoping we'd get to break some news on air. Like, Aaron Rodgers wants to see this too. So why do you, like, how would you describe, if you could just like put it in one sentence, the approach to stand pat? Like, if you're going to give the reasons, if I'm on the phone with you and I'm Brian Gutekunst and you're Aaron Rodgers, or no, flip that. I'm Aaron Rodgers and you're Brian Gutekunst. Explain to me why the Packers did nothing.
So if I'm Goody,
yes,
I would say it in simple terms: we can't afford it. That's probably what they're looking at, right? It's, can we leverage the future for now? And listen, if this is a team that's, above 500, has looked like a good football team, you can leverage that. You can say, hey, we need to make one move that'll put us over the top. Let's go do it. And then you look at the season of, it's 3-5. Is one wide receiver going to change, or one other player going to change the dynamic of this team? Who knows? It could have, but maybe in Gutekunst's mind, it's too much cost now to do that. But like you mentioned, I get the frustration. Why not go out there and do it? I guess I'm not the GM for a reason, right? Because I'd be like, let's go for it. But there are other factors in it. And I think his answer would be, we can't afford it.
Other teams are going for it. Even teams that we don't see as being great teams. The Dolphins went for it. Even going back to the offseason, you trade a first-round pick for Tyreek Hill, they're going for it. It's not like they're at the top of the AFC standings and they trade another first-round pick for Bradley Chubb. They see an opportunity to get value. I think what's interesting for a team like Green Bay is, I think it's easier for bad teams, at least untalented teams, to make trades, because you can just say, we need the talent. If you're the Bears, give up the picks. Chase Claypool is immediately potentially the most talented receiver, at the very least, on the Bears. So you look at the Packers team, it's like, oh, well, Bradley Chubb. Well, Bradley Chubb's not worth a first round pick to the Green Bay Packers. And so that's where I think it starts to get more difficult. You really have to thread that needle, and that's a difficult needle to thread. Let's go back to the Bills game. Aaron Rodgers said something that I thought was fascinating. He said on Pat McAfee's show that this was the first game that he felt like, energy-wise, before the game, they were ready to play. That quote sort of knocked me on my ass, because that is an indictment of culture, of coaching, of leadership. What did you think when you heard that?
I thought the same thing. Well, in terms of being like, oh, I didn't realize that week 8 of football, I guess is kind of what he was getting at, is this is the first time 2 months into the season, we were like ready to go. Granted, again, it was a Sunday night game against Buffalo. Had it been a noon game against the Lions, I guess, would that have been, would he have said the same thing? I don't know.
And by the way, here comes a noon game against the Lions.
Exactly. But I also found it interesting just how much he talked about practice, right? Like they're practicing the right way and not wasting reps. So I'm thinking, have they just not been going all out in practice? Has that really been the issue of why they just have not been able to get things going? We know practice is important, and he mentioned it. You can go out and practice and stink on Sunday, or you can not practice and do well on Sunday. It's kind of a horse apiece, but you want to be able to practice. And so I'm thinking, have they just not been going full force at practice? And that's why he's saying all these things now. But maybe when he said, I now feel like the Packers, after that Bills loss. Maybe that's when he was saying, hey, we're actually practicing the way we should be. And that's why it's the first time all season long I felt like we were energetically and ready for this game, despite the outcome.
So I was trying to find the quote, and I couldn't find the quote last year, but I remember around this time, and it might have even been later, but they were winning, so we weren't really worried about it. Aaron Rodgers said, this was the first week of practice where I felt like we had a championship mindset. And it was like late October, early November. It was around this same time. And I just wonder what it's going to take to get them to start this from the beginning. And I don't know how much of it is about, this team going to the playoffs 3 straight years, being in the NFC Championship game 2 of those 3 years, and understanding that like they're going to be judged based on what they do in the playoffs. And so it's kind of hard for them to get up for some of these games. I don't know, like, how do you change that, Lily?
That's a great question. I feel like now it's kind of not saying they, aren't putting their all into practice, but it kind of feels like they're just like, oh, we're the Packers. We're expected to win. We're going to win.
Yeah.
It has not come to fruition because, again, when you're having mental errors on, I think he said it was 20% of the snaps this past loss. I mean, this is more than a month into the season. I mean, you're basically at the halfway point of the season. You're still having mental errors. It's like, why is this happening? I mean, this can happen the first couple of weeks of the season, but not this far into it, not halfway into a season. I don't know what it is about they can't translate what they're doing on practice to game days. I don't really know what the disconnect is there because it's not just like one guy, hey, we'll fix one guy, they'll be fine. It's a collection of guys. It's a collection of mistakes on the field on a variety of plays. And again, the injuries certainly don't help the situation, but I'm not sure what they need to get done. And again, I've always said it, and it all starts with Aaron Rodgers. If he, granted, he did as best as he could with the protection he had and the receivers he had against the Bills. It's maybe just tries to galvanize these guys or something, Peter, because I don't understand why there were so many mental mistakes 7 to 8 weeks into a season. Shouldn't be happening.
It shouldn't. And at a certain point, and I've made this case before, Aaron Rodgers has credited Matt LaFleur for saying this is a players-led team. But at a certain point, it's the coach's job to get you ready to play. And, I think the responsibility falls on everybody. And so everybody has been failing. And unfortunately, that's been a theme this season. We had Dusty Evely on the show yesterday talking X's and O's. And something happened, at least my perspective on it in the fourth quarter. Aaron Rodgers, he started worrying less, and I think just playing more. The throw to Amari Rodgers on the go route on third down, the Samori Toure second reaction play, I'm just going to throw this corner to Romeo Doubs in tight coverage and let him go make a play. That seemed like an important moment to me. Am I overthinking this?
No, I don't think so. I think that's a really good point. Teams always say when they can play free, when they can play fun, that's when they're at their best. I feel like he was kind of getting back to what he's been so good at. It's the unscheduled stuff. He's out of the pocket. He's able to scramble there. We saw him get a first down with his legs. It's like that's vintage Aaron Rodgers and what he can do best. And that touchdown throw to Samori Toure was great. That throw to Romeo Doubs was better, and a phenomenal catch there as well. But when you see him kind of do the little things that make Aaron Rodgers, that's kind of when you're like, this is what's going to make the offense click, because he's so good at these things that it's hard to do these things, but he does them so well. And when he got back to that late in the game, it's kind of like, maybe this is what they needed to keep doing to get this offense back on track.
Yeah, and you and I had talked about this early in the season, I felt like the recipe for this team on offense was run the ball and be relatively efficient underneath, and then 2-3 times a game, hit something down the field. And I felt like it probably needed to be one of the rookies. I did not expect it to be Samori Toure, but here we are. He's making plays. That's great. I think I should have been maybe more specific in my wish casting and added Aaron Rodgers needs to make 2 or 3 plays a game, because that's what he did in this game. And I think if the defense plays reasonably well in the first half, this game is close at the end. And if Big Bob Tunyon doesn't get called for offensive pass interference, the Packers have the ball at the end of the game with a chance to go win it. And we feel very differently about how this game went, I think. And so Rodgers, you and I have leveled our fair share of criticism, me probably more than my fair share of criticism at Aaron Rodgers. And for him to look like this, sort of like, yeah, this is the guy. This is the guy that they need. So what, like, is this just the path, do you think, moving forward? Run the ball, Aaron Rodgers, run around a little bit and try and make some plays?
It's going to have to be, I guess, until your wide receiver core gets healthier. I mean, that's kind of what they have available, unless, they bring Juwan Winfrey up. Again, it's kind of just interchanging pieces in that receiver room. They're not going to have a Stephon Diggs-like talent. No offense to any of those guys in the room. They're really good. They're not going to have like a Stephon Diggs top dog talent. So it's like these guys are all good. They're all young. They're still learning. And, Samari made a great play. Amari made a great play. Romeo made a great play. They need more of that from that wide receiver group. And then when you have Aaron Rodgers getting back to the old vintage Aaron Rodgers, I mean, when he's making those beautiful throws and these guys are catching them and coming down with them, I mean, that's kind of when you're like, this is what gets this confidence in this offense rolling. And that's what can manufacture this team into getting some wins, because you already know what Aaron Jones, you already know what A.J. Dillon can do running and passing. Those guys know what they're doing. Get those other pieces going. Starts with Rodgers. I think he looked like him, more like himself in the fourth quarter, like you said, and then get those pieces rolling and you could turn this around. And the Lions, I mean, if they don't do it against the Lions, Peter, I don't really know what else to say.
It's a historically bad defense right now. And so if you can't, I mean, they ran for almost 200 yards against the best run defense in the league. That if you can't run against this team, if you can't throw against this team, I don't know, it's just probably not going to happen, right? Let's go to the other side of the ball here as we finish up. Defensively, Rob Domofsky reporting that there is some internal frustration to the point that players are not confident in what's going on with Joe Barry. Matt LaFleur had a pretty upfront answer about it when he said, look, we have to listen to our players. This makes 3 defensive coordinators in a row now for whom this is the case, where the players have had to go to the coaches and be like, this ain't it. So what is the path forward here?
Maybe kind of following that blueprint, right? I think, was it like Zadarius Smith and a couple of those guys went to
Zadarius Smith and Kenny Clark in 2020 went into Mike Pettine's office and said, we got to change. And guess what? They did.
And they did. So, maybe Matt LaFleur making that statement of like, hey, maybe we should listen to our players a little bit more. Maybe that's what they have to do. And I understand the justification of you can't play man all the time, but Jair not being on Stephon Diggs for a majority of the game. I mean, that's all their defensive game planning. But again, maybe it's just something where you need these leaders on defense to go to Joe Barry and say, hey, man, like maybe zone isn't working. Maybe we want to do this, that, and the other. Like put us in the right spots. Maybe move me out of the slot to the outside. It's got to be something like that. If this is a player-led team, maybe just go to them and say, this isn't working. But I don't think it's a bad thing to do that. And granted, I don't think Joe Barry would be the kind of guy to say, screw that, I'm not listening to you guys. I think he's a great coach, and he will listen to his players. And maybe that's the change that they need this week to get that accomplished.
Okay. It's been a weird week. It's been a little bit of a rough week. Lily, what is your favorite Halloween candy?
Nice pivot. Nice segue. Oh no, I'm kind of on the hot spot here because I'm a glutton for candy.
Okay.
So like way too many.
So your answer is all.
All candy. Okay. Do people give out whatchamacallits? Or is that like not a thing that people give out?
I don't know that I've ever gotten one in my my little bucket, but that doesn't mean that's not a bad answer.
Okay, I enjoy whatchamacallits. They're just
okay.
Dish. Otherwise, I do enjoy a good like Jolly Rancher sucker, which is kind of a bland answer, but I do like
No, we gave out Jolly Rancher. We had a mixed bag, and one of them was the Jolly Rancher gummies.
Ooh, fancy.
And they're pretty good. They're pretty good. Yeah, it's in a Skittles pack, Skittles, Starburst, and then Jolly Rancher's gummies. They were popular, I have to say.
You know what? I probably should have gone trick-or-treating or something. I don't know if people will give me candy, but I'll whatever.
You could probably pass. Put on a mask. No one knows. You're short enough that you could pass as a child.
I'm like short enough where people might think I'm like just an older kid or something.
Right. I had some pretty tall, like I can tell you're 12, but you're like an adult sized. Yeah. So it works. I think my favorite is there's nothing better than a bite-sized Butterfinger. I know that like that's a little bit of a hot take that they're not everyone's favorite candy. I love the fun size Butterfinger because a full Butterfinger is too much. It's too sweet. It sticks to your teeth. The fun size is the perfect size. That's why I think the Halloween candy, like, it's not what's your favorite candy, Halloween candy. I think there's a different caveat there.
Well, going off that though, fun size Twix hits the spot.
So my only thing is it's just one.
Well, that's why it's perfect, because I can just
see. But I want a full size Twix. I love Twix. Just like give me the problem is I have like 4 of them, and then it's like a full size Twix, and then we have to do that whole thing. So, all right, Lily. If we're not here next week this time talking about a win, God help us truly, because things will have gotten. We might see Jordan Love sooner rather than later if that's the case. We're trying to stay positive around here, so we're going to do our best. Lily, I appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Peter.
All right, thanks to Lily for joining the show. Always great to talk with our pal Lily. Today's episode brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made so easy because you're playing against a number, just one number. Well, a couple, because you're picking a couple players, but you don't have to play against thousands of other people. You don't have to, go against someone that's got all sorts of advanced systems for picking players or has 500 entries in a game. No. You are playing against Prize Picks. They set a projection for a player, Aaron Jones, rushing yards. And if you think he's going to have more rushing yards, then you get to pick that. Hence, Prize Picks. You win a prize. Put a couple players together, 2 or more, and you can win up to 10 times your money just on deciding if a player is going to produce more or less than their projection. You're just playing the number. Plus, they have more than just football. Any sport you can imagine, they have these projections for. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget to use the promo code Locked On at sign up for the instant deposit match up to $100. And thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen. I got it right this time. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, my show. Please, thank you. The biggest stories in sports, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. All right, back tomorrow, our crossover edition. Matt Derry from Locked On Lions, our good friend, will be on our show. We'll be doing it together for our crossover and then a live show on Friday. Of course, we will be live after the game as well on Sunday. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers. And anytime you want to come hang out with us live on YouTube, you can do that at the Locked On Packers YouTube page after the game and every Friday during the season to stay Locked On Packers.